Hello, welcome once again to the Turret of Pleasure here in the Enchanted Kingdom of Hermione. I'm the Lord Chamberlain of the Enchanted Kingdom, Zip Gun. And with my partner in crime, the Microphonic Fool, we continue to try and make these videos as good as we can without too much farting around. So we're going between cameras. Forgive us if the sound is funny, but hey, we're not building the piano here. I'm going to show you some books today. I read a lot of books. I know, that's so 20th century. But there's a lot of books about music, and some of them are worth, well, they're all worth knowing about anyway. And I have four, which is, I buy some books, and I pay real money for them, like $30 a book. But a lot of them just find me. And a couple of these, let me think now, I think actually, well, they kind of all found me in one way or another. The Empress, in her travels, manages to find a lot of free book bins. And the stuff she finds. And my first book here this is a real kind of, I don't know what to think of this book. Lauren St. John is the author. Hardcore Troubadour, The Life and Near Death of Steve Earle. Now, this is not a small book. How many pages in this sucker? Oh, 400 page. Now, Steve Earle, needless to say, is still alive. Now, my opinion of Steve Earle is pretty much, I don't care. I've seen him live once on the Copperhead Road tour at the Diamond in Toronto. Thank you, Wayne Brown. I think he bought me a ticket. And I thought he was like a really not so good Springsteen clone. And apparently back in those days he was drinking and drugging heavily, and it wouldn't have surprised me if I caught him on one of those nights, because I thought he was pretty lackluster. And everybody was just getting hyped to death. People are like, oh God, he's the second coming. And as it turns out, he's this book did not compel me to go listen to any of his music, which I don't think I have anything by him in my collection. He's hardcore Americana, but what he is, and in the title of this book, it tells you, The Life and Near Death of Steve Earle. What he is, in my parlance, he's a survivor. He's been there. He wrote about it. By God, and he's still, miracle, he's still here. He hung out with Townes Van Zandt and Guy Clark and all these sort of beautiful losers. And unfortunately for me, that from my distance of where I sit, this seems to really be a big chunk of his story, not the music. So the music, like, he's famous for about maybe, I don't know, a couple of records. He did a record called Guitar Town, kind of his debut. It was very highly thought of. It happened at the right time. Basically started the Americana movement, if you will. And then he turned into a mess. Copperhead Road came out. It was okay. The record label, he hated the record label. They hated him. MCA, what do you want? Music Cemetery of America. And then he just sort of went into free fall and came out of it kind of more as an indie artist. And he has sort of had he's run the Survivor circuit ever since. This book really, what I learned from this book is Steve Earle is yet another rich white kid who, wanted to be a star. And he became a star. It fucked him up. He turned into an alcoholic, drug addict, drug addicted, whatever. But he ultimately ended up as this very highly respected Americana star. He's known bad times, but he was born into a fairly decent family. I'm not keeping this book. The writing of this book is for people that think his music is fantastic. I think it's okay. I find a lot of the stories got tedious. Him, being mean to his wife, cheating on his wife, getting wasted on drugs. It's boring. I don't want to read about it. And at some point, I might have Guitar Town on vinyl. I might drag it out and listen to it, but I'll bet it doesn't knock me out. And in the same free pile, we found this. Now, this is a better book for a couple of reasons. First of all, Ben Fong Torres is a good writer. And he used to write, I think, for Rolling Stone. He did a pretty good book on Little Feat a while back. And so he's a sort of a senior member of the Rock Writers Guild, if you will. And of course, Graham Parsons is another mythological figure. Of course, he did die young of a heroin, and then his body was kidnapped by his manager and a whole bunch of other stuff. Again, now this book is easier to read for me because, again, Graham Parsons, I sort of don't really know his stuff very well, and none of it has ever reached out and grabbed me. The fact that he was kind of where Emmylou Harris got her start is interesting. And so, again, this didn't make me want to go out and listen to any more Graham Parsons records. And I was surprised I don't have any. I thought I had a best of somewhere, but I don't. Again, a rich Southern kid, white kid, yeah, of course. And he, in the nudie suits and everything, it's kind of interesting. It's made me, like, if I run across something by this guy somewhere, I'll give it a second look. Everybody speaks very highly of him as a creator and as a person. It's sort of too bad, of course, that he got cut off when he did. I think it's figures that Mo Austin signed him to Warner Brothers, which was not a country label at all. And he was pretty country. I mean, he's more country than even I can kind of tolerate sometimes. But anyway, this one, I don't know if I'll keep it or not. Maybe. Sometimes I try to pass these on. This one, I don't want to keep it, but I will because I'm not throwing it away. Now, this one the Empress actually bought as a surprise for me. And this is needless to say, this book is different than the previous two. It is about a musician who I greatly respect, but I don't really know a lot. I don't have a lot of her stuff. The one record that I've got that I know inside out is the Radha Krishna Radha record, with the one side of her and John Jr. on drums, and she is just throwing it down on the Yamaha organ. It's weird. It's amazing record. This is a good story though, because I didn't know her story. Very good. Well, first of all, start at the beginning. Brought up in the church from a very religious family, very typical of the African American community at the time, and got into the bebop scene, and was not your typical bebop musician. She didn't do drugs. She didn't drink. She was straight, I guess. And the only thing that she did that everybody in bebop did was she got married pretty early to the wrong person, and that kind of came and went. And ultimately, she met John Coltrane, and they fell in love. And ultimately, she joined his band, and this is when John had quit drugs and was getting deeply spiritual matters, and Alice basically was right there with him. And when John died, she was, in a bit of a quandary because, of course, her husband had died. She was suddenly the inheritor of his legacy. They were not badly off. John was driving a Jaguar, I believe, and they had a nice house with a studio in it out in the burbs in Long Island. And she continued to make very quirky musics, and she learned how to play the harp. As a gift to her, John bought her a harp, and in a kind of a touching thing in the book, the harp had to be custom built, and it arrived custom built at her door about 2 weeks. I think it was after John's funeral, which is kind of sad but touching. This is not an easy read because Andy Bay, is it? Here's a funny thing. Though she got this, I don't know where she got this from, but there's a sticker over here, a very unsightly sticker, I might add, for a $30 book. And from what we can ascertain, all it says underneath it is Andy Bay. Andy Beta, sorry. So I don't get it. I'm not sure. It's a small publisher. It details her sort of transition, if you will, from more traditional Christian, gospel, Baptist, what have you, African American style Christianity. And it follows her as she sort of goes more and more into Eastern philosophies, ultimately kind of ending up with the Hare Krishnas, but not exclusively Hare Krishna, and basically using her wealth, and she did have some considerable wealth, largely thanks to John's legacy. She used it for very good purposes, and she built these sort of rural retreats where people could come and live in like groups of, not a lot of people, but a sort of a commune, if you will. And it broaches on her playing music again at the end of her life, which isn't very well documented. And she played with son Ravi Coltrane, who's of course a well-known jazz figure now, and her nephew, whose real name escapes me, but Flying Lotus we all know him as, who I really dig. And so she threads that little story through there. It was good. It doesn't really linger too much on the records, which I kind of get. There's enough there to tell me what went down. Ed Michel dragged her to... She did a record for Warner Brothers. That's one of the weirdest organ records you'll ever hear. So that one I'm sort of wondering, I'd like to give it to somebody who's into this sort of thing. And then finally, and I came back to this, I read this, apparently, and I don't remember reading it. But I remember my impression was, nice. Anyway, Beast Swing by Richard Thompson. Now, I don't care much for Steve Earle. Don't really care much for Graham Parsons. I quite like and respect Alice Coltrane, but I just flat out love this guy. Now, this guy, I don't know, I'm not even going to bother with all the superlatives. One of the most important songwriters in the English language in the 20th and 21st century. Incredibly consistent and just a mind-bendingly good guitar player to boot. And he's a bit of a quirky dude because he was one of the founders of English folk rock, along with his mates in Fairport Convention and whatnot. A real family, too. These people really stick together. They all played together in all kinds of different incarnations and bands and special whatevers. And but somewhere between here and there, he important moments in his career are early in the days with Fairport. They were involved in a car crash which tragically took the life of their drummer and his then fairly casual, I think, girlfriend. And that really shook them up. But strangely, they all got back on the horse and produced what many think was their greatest record, one of 3 they put out that year. So it documents that time quite well. I think 69. So imagine putting out a record in whatever, January, and then recording and then getting ready to put out another record and then having a car crash where your drummer dies, and then you go out, you recruit a new drummer, you record a 3rd album, and it comes out in December. The 3rd album being Legion Leaf. He goes through all the personnel changes and the stuff with great humor and aplomb. He's a very, very friendly guy, it sounds like. And he became a Sufi Muslim in about 73, 72. He met and married Linda Peters, who became Linda Thompson, and they played together. And they had a band, and they made some absolutely just A+ records. His writing is fantastic, Their voices matched together perfectly. It was just absolutely the best husband-wife music team in the universe. And that lasted for 4 albums until, like all showbiz marriages, it came crashing down with a fantastic album and a unbelievable tour that followed when they were barely speaking to each other. And since then, Richard has plowed a solo career, and he's made, I don't know how many. I don't even. They're right beside me here. How many Thompson records do I have? Just on CD, I got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, plus the 8 CD box set. So I got 25 or so Thompson CDs and probably another dozen of his LPs. This wisely cuts off in 1975, which is essentially when he and Linda called it quits. And he had gone through a brief phase where he had a Sufi band, which didn't work. And there's some on his box set, some evidence of that band, which is pretty good, but I get it. And it kind of gets you into where he then began his solo career, which maybe there'll be it doesn't say volume 1, but it's got it's called B Swing, Losing My Way and Finding My Voice. And then the date 67 to 75. Whether he writes a book 75 on, I'll bet he doesn't, and I don't think he needs to. This is about as perfect. And if you don't know Richard Thompson, like if this would have been like the Steve Earle book to me, reading this I would have immediately run out and started listening to Richard Thompson. The Steve Earle book does not really do that to me, although it clearly shows, if I want to get a grip on this guy, where I should go first. And for that, I'm grateful. But there you have it. 4 books, 4 in, 4 out. Varying degrees of quality. I'll read them all. I won't keep them all. But you learn something in every book in the music business. You learn something about the music business. And so even if it's an artist you don't care about at all, you'll read stories or hear stories that are worth reading if you're, like me, a nut for the music industry. So there you go. Thanks for watching, and we'll get back at you later with other stuff, more Kiss deep dives. God, they're going to come thick and fast soon, I think. Take care of each other, and we'll talk at you soon.